Hi, Eric Eberhard again from Seneca Conservation District, and today we want to talk to you about some tips and tricks for seeding small grains here this fall. So today we're going to talk about variety selection, a little bit of agronomy as far as herbicides and fertility go, and then maybe about controlling volunteer cover crops in the fall as well. So one of the first things that you want to do is make sure that you're selecting the right wheat variety. There's all sorts of information out there that can help you select and determine what would be right where. Some of the resources that I like to utilize and others in our office is of course the OSU variety trials. They have a real nice test plot every single year, and they even have a 3-year study for some surrounding counties. So like if you go to their website, which they'll probably have up here on the bottom of my video, you can see that like Wood County is rather close to Seneca with same soil types, and in there you can see the different varieties that have been planted on that for the last 3 years. There's also another yield trial place called First, and they're an independent research company, and they also have some good information. And then as well, I guess I always like to have people try to do their own research. I know it takes a lot of time to do test strips and tests on your own farm, but I know this fall we had a 12-acre field that we had broken 8 varieties, and that was able to tell us a lot as far as which ones we're going to keep using going forwards and which ones we might let fall off. For your fertility, a good rule of thumb is 20 to 30 pounds of nitrogen in the fall, depending on how early you planted the wheat. The earlier you go, the higher the rate of nitrogen might not be as necessary. But it is always good to add a little bit of nitrogen in the fall to get the quick growth, because our days are getting shorter and it does get pretty cold pretty fast, and so does the soil. So that way the wheat really slows down its growth. So anything we can do to keep it going late into the fall, the better. And then as well as phosphorus. Phosphorus and potassium, they both are key for helping the wheat overwinter easier. And then also with our stand counts and winter survivability. So we don't want to over apply our nutrients, so you want to make sure you're watching your soil tests. But just a little bit of phosphorus and potassium does go a long way in the fall. Another thing that you really want to keep in mind is with earlier variety of beans, you can actually get to the point where you might plant wheat too early. So a lot of times a good rule of thumb is to follow the Hessian fly free date. So for Seneca County, that is between September 23rd and September 24th. Another big one too, besides the Hessian fly, is aphids. But if you wait until the Hessian fly free date, typically aphids aren't an issue any longer. So as long as we keep that in mind, we shouldn't have any issues with them. So not just fertility is important, but planting depth as well. The recommended planting depth for a lot of the small grains, especially winter wheat, is 1.5 inches, which seems fairly deep for planting small grain that late in the year, but it's very critical for winter survivability, and then for stand uniformity there in the fall when everything starts to emerge. So the deeper you can plant it, you don't want to sock it in too deep, but if you're at that 1.5 inches, you have a lot less chance of what they call heaving than throughout the winter, and then you're a lot more likely to have a good stand going into the spring. Another key agronomy tip to keep in mind is seeding rates. OSU recommends 1.2 to 1.5 million seeds per acre. I like to try to keep that towards the higher end myself, so it helps with ensure that I get enough tillers per foot row. Because there again, the more tillers, the more heads we'll have, and the easier it is to attain the high yields that we demand to get the money out of it that we need to. Just like soybeans, with small grains as well, the later planted that we get, the more necessary it is to bump that seeding rate up to make sure that we do get the tiller stands that we want and counts. So I believe it's after 10 days after the fly free date, so 10 days after, say roughly September 23rd for our area, you could see as much as a 20% yield reduction in the wheat crop the following spring with the same seeding rate. So that's why we have to be cognizant and keep bumping our rates up the later it goes to ensure that we're setting ourselves up for success come the next spring. If you're already utilizing cover crops, that can add another set of challenges or management strategies that you'll have to keep in mind. One thing right off the bat is say you have a thick cereal rye mat from the previous spring that you drill your wheat into. If you're putting your wheat into something like that and there's still a thick residue mat of rye or something else out there, you might have to add a little bit more nitrogen to help compensate for that, similar to planting corn into a high residue cover crop situation. And then as well as if the mat's too thick, it can actually hinder the wheat emergence by a substantial amount, to the point where it might not be that good of an idea to even plant a small grain into that field. So you might have to address something like that as well. Not only the cover crop mat can be an issue, but another big thing to keep in mind is potential for volunteer cover crops coming up in the field. So there's a lot of sources where cereal rye or annual rye or any number of other small grains can contaminate a small grain field that you're trying to grow. So especially cereal rye, for one, is the main culprit that you'll see here in Seneca County. And so say you had the late spring and you drilled your beans in and you want to terminate your rye, and it had gone to seed before you were able to get everything killed off. So if it's too much of an issue, there again, that might not be a field to put a small grain into. You might just want to let that one go for another year and try to control the cereal rye the following spring, and maybe put wheat into that after. But if you absolutely have to do that, there are a few herbicides that you might be able to use to help slow that down and slow the populations down. A couple of those to keep in mind would be Prowl, is a common trade name. That one has a real good job on slowing down any seeds that try to germinate right on top of the soil. Another one would be Zidua, to put down pre-emerge before the small grain comes up out of the ground. That can help slow down a lot of the small seeded volunteer cover crops that might be right on top of the ground. But there again, a lot of those things too, they need to be ordered almost immediately, because it's going to be very tricky to get a lot of those things on hand come this fall. So you really have to keep those things in mind and try to plan ahead. So to reiterate what we talked about a little bit here today, plan ahead, make sure that you're getting the right variety for the right soil type, because it is a very big deal if you put the wrong small grain variety on the wrong soil. You'll pay for that all year long. And then there again, plan ahead for the agronomy. It's not overwhelming. It just takes a few few minutes to think about ahead of time. And then there again, if you are dealing with cover crops and you think those might be an issue, definitely keep those in mind and make sure that you have a game plan before the day that you need to be drilling something. Because as everybody knows, in the fall we don't have very many days to do anything. Like all of my videos, I could probably stand out here and talk about it for about 3-4 hours, but I had to condense it down. So like and subscribe to our videos, and my contact info should be appearing here on the bottom of the screen. And again, my name's Eric Eberhard, and don't hesitate, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help you plan through small grain plantings or anything that might come up on your farm. And that's what we're here to do, to help you, and we got more videos coming this spring. Thank you. It's going to be our most viewed video.